It started with the message, a single broadcast that cut across every human communication channel, overriding military frequencies, hijacking satellites, and flashing across the skies in burning letters that defied explanation. War has a price, and it's your turn to pay. The words weren't spoken in some alien dialect. They weren't translated through artificial means. They arrived in perfect human English, burning with the weight of 1 billion voices, each carrying a whisper of rage. At first, people thought it was a hoax, a sick joke played by some rogue AI. Then, the ships came. They arrived without ceremony, blotting out the stars with their hulking shadows, colossal behemoths that made Earth's greatest war machines look like mere playthings. The sky itself seemed to tremble under the weight of their presence. And then, the first shot was fired. New York fell in under an hour. London was wiped off the map before anyone could mount a response. The defenses of Beijing, Moscow, and Washington crumbled like wet paper under the sheer force of their weapons. This was no invasion. It was an execution. The ones who came had no interest in negotiations, no demands, no declarations of conquest, only death. For years, humanity had fought amongst itself, waging war over land, resources, ideologies. But now we weren't fighting for territory. We weren't fighting for control. We were fighting to exist. The first wave of Earth's defenders, our best soldiers, our most advanced fleets, were annihilated in days. It wasn't just superior technology. It was experience. We were children playing at war, and these things were something else entirely. They fought without mercy, without hesitation, with the precision of something that had done this 1,000 times before. And yet, despite the hopelessness, despite the overwhelming force brought down upon us, humanity did what it had always done best. We adapted. We learned. We survived. It started with small victories. A single downed warship near the ruins of Berlin, a successful ambush in the shattered remains of Tokyo. We scavenged their technology, we studied their tactics, and slowly, painfully, we fought back. The price was steep. Entire cities were sacrificed for a single enemy outpost. Millions died in battles that barely bought us a few more days of existence. But we kept going. Because we knew something they didn't. We understood war, not the clean, calculated conflicts they were used to, where the stronger force dictated the terms. No, humanity had perfected something else entirely. Guerrilla warfare, insurgency. We made Earth a hellscape for them. They took our skies? We turned the ground into a death trap. They controlled the cities? We collapsed them with bombs and turned the rubble into fortresses. They hunted us with precision? We struck from the shadows, using every dirty trick, every desperate strategy, every ounce of madness that had ever driven human history forward. For the first time, they hesitated. For the first time, they bled. And that was when the real war began. They retaliated with fire and fury, leveling what was left of Earth's civilization in their desperate attempt to crush us. But they had made a mistake. A mistake every conqueror in history had made when facing humanity. They underestimated the sheer, unrelenting spite of our species. We had nothing left to lose. No homes, no cities, no governments. The concept of nations no longer mattered. Borders were meaningless. We had become one people, united not by diplomacy or ideology, but by necessity, by vengeance. And when a species fights with nothing left to lose, it fights without limits. They called us vermin. We made them believe it. Our soldiers became ghosts, appearing from nowhere, striking hard, and vanishing before the dust settled. Our engineers turned the wreckage of their ships into weapons they had never seen before. Scientists worked without sleep, repurposing alien technology at a speed that should have been impossible. But the real terror? That was the civilians. The old, the weak, the unarmed. Those they thought were helpless. They were wrong. The elderly who once taught history now taught war. Grandmothers who had raised children became instructors in sabotage. The youth, the ones who had been forced to watch their homes burn, their families torn apart, they became something even we feared. They did not hesitate. They did not forgive. A child with nothing but a scavenged plasma rifle took down one of their generals in Argentina. A blind man, a former pianist, detonated himself inside a command post, taking 3 of their warlords with him. A woman who had never held a weapon before the war managed to single-handedly infiltrate their supply lines and poison their rations. They came expecting war. We gave them horror. And the more they pushed, the more they lost. Because no matter how much they slaughtered, we always came back. We always came back. They sent their best hunters, their deadliest assassins. We left their bodies hanging in the ruins of their own war machines. They deployed weapons meant to break our minds, to shatter our will. All it did was make us angrier. Because that was the secret they never understood. Humans don't break. We don't surrender. We don't stop. We had been at war with ourselves since the dawn of our existence. Every war in history, every moment of suffering, every nightmare we had endured had led to this, had shaped us into the perfect survivors. They had technology. They had numbers. We had rage. And rage won. The turning point wasn't a grand battle. It wasn't a singular act of defiance. It was something smaller, quieter. It happened in the wreckage of a nameless city, where the air still burned with the aftershocks of orbital bombardment. The enemy had moved in to clear out the survivors, their towering forms scanning the ruins, certain that nothing living remained. But something had survived. A squad of humans, no more than 7, hidden beneath the rubble, waiting. Starving, armed with nothing but makeshift weapons and a single stolen pulse rifle. Their leader, a woman whose name no one would ever remember, made the call. They struck like wolves. Knives plunged into exposed joints. Scavenged explosives detonated under armored feet. They fought without fear, without hesitation. They killed. And when the last enemy fell, gurgling in confusion, his blood soaking the dust-covered streets, something happened. One of them, a survivor barely past the age of 16, lifted the enemy's shattered helmet and let out a broken, half-mad laugh. "They bleed!" 2 words. That was all it took, because if they could bleed, they could die. The message spread like wildfire. Across the ruined world, the whispers took shape. They bleed. They can die. Humanity had been fighting to survive. But now? Now we fought to win. The war changed. The enemy felt it before they saw it. Before, they had been the hunters. Now they became the hunted. We weren't just fighting battles. We were making examples. We stopped hitting supply chains. We started targeting their leaders, their officers, their commanders. One by one, they vanished. Some were found strung up in the ruins of their own war machines, their bodies torn apart with human weapons. Others simply disappeared, dragged into the dark by hands they never saw coming. The fear started small, a hesitation in their movements, a tightening of their formations. Then the cracks deepened. They stopped patrolling alone. They flinched at shadows. Their transmissions carried undertones of something we had never heard from them before. Doubt. They had come to Earth to exterminate us, believing we were nothing more than another primitive species waiting to be wiped away. But we weren't. We were something else entirely. They had tried to teach us the price of war. Now, we were making them pay it. The first confirmed desertion happened in the ruins of what was once Paris. Their soldiers, once unshakable, once merciless, simply left. A full unit, abandoning their posts in the dead of night, their weapons discarded, their massive war machines left to rust. They fled into the darkness, hoping to escape something they could no longer understand. Fear. not the kind of fear that came from facing a superior enemy. No, this was different. This was primal. They had watched their kind vanish without a trace. They had seen what happened to those who hesitated. They had witnessed our cruelty, because that was what scared them the most, how efficient we had become at this war. They had thought us savages, but the truth was far worse. We were learning. We had adapted to their technology, understood their tactics, anticipated their every move. And now we were perfecting it. The real shift in power came when we stole their ships. Not just the wreckage, not just scraps. We took fully operational vessels. Their own pilots, broken and afraid, gave them to us in exchange for mercy that we did not promise. And that was when we stopped being prey. No longer were we fighting in the ruins of our own world, scavenging to survive. Now, we took the fight to them. The first raid happened on a minor outpost orbiting Jupiter, a place we should have never been able to reach, a place they thought was safe. They never saw us coming. Using their own stolen technology, we tore through their defenses. Soldiers that had once bombed our cities now choked on our atmosphere as we vented their stations into the void. We did not conquer. We did not occupy. We erased. We left nothing behind but silence. The message was clear. We were done running. We were done hiding. They had come to destroy us. Now it was our turn. And for the first time, across their fractured communications, across their encrypted frequencies, we heard something we had never heard before. A plea. A single transmission, filled with desperation, with disbelief. They won't stop. They finally understood. This was no longer a war. This was vengeance. They tried to negotiate. It started as whispers across their comm channels, uncertainty, hesitation. Then, the first official transmission arrived. A desperate attempt at diplomacy. They offered peace. We didn't answer, because there was no peace left to give. They had come to cleanse us, to wipe our species from existence without a second thought. They had turned our cities to ash, slaughtered our families, and now they wanted to talk. We let them wait in silence. Days passed, then weeks. And while they sat in fear, hoping for an answer, we continued. Raids turned into full-blown assaults. Their outer colonies, worlds they had ruled for centuries, began to fall one by one. Not just to soldiers, but to the civilians they had once dismissed as weak. They had thought humans were fragile. They had believed our species was soft. But what they didn't understand was that humanity had never been defined by peace. We were built for war. The breaking point came in the skies above one of their core worlds. It was supposed to be an impenetrable stronghold, a planet encased in orbital defense grids, protected by a fleet that had never known defeat. We tore through them in a single night, not with overwhelming numbers, not with superior technology, with sheer, unrelenting madness. We crashed stolen ships into their stations, detonating reactors in suicide runs. We sent squads of soldiers onto their hulls, carving through their armor with makeshift weapons, tearing them apart piece by piece. And when the battle was over, when their once mighty fleet lay in burning ruin, we did something that shattered them completely. We broadcast a message, not in their language, not through translation, but in our own words, spoken in every human tongue, carried by every stolen frequency, a message of promise. War has a price, and now it's your turn to pay. That was when the surrender began. Not in formal declarations, not in official treaties. It started as desertion. Entire fleets abandoned their posts. Officers turned their weapons on their own commanders rather than face us, because they knew. They knew what was coming. They had made the mistake of believing this war would be swift, that humanity would crumble under the weight of their might. Instead, they had created something far worse. They had forged monsters. And now, There was no stopping us. The first true surrender wasn't an act of diplomacy. It wasn't a carefully worded agreement or a ceremonial laying down of arms. It was a massacre, not our massacre. Theirs. One of their own warlords, once a high commander in the initial assault on Earth, was hunted by his own kind. His forces had dwindled, his armies shattered, his ships lost to the void. He begged for reinforcements, for salvation. None came. His own people turned against him, hoping to buy favor, hoping to appease us. They dragged his broken body into the light, broadcasting their surrender to every known frequency. Their words shook with terror, their voices pleading. Take him. Take everything. Just let us live. We didn't answer. We didn't need to, because by then they already knew. Mercy was no longer on the table. The war wasn't ending. Not yet. Not until we decided it was over. Our forces, once scattered, once desperate, now surged like wildfire across the stars. The shattered remains of our world had become a forge, crafting warriors that knew no fear, no hesitation. And we did not just fight. We conquered. For every city they burned, we burned a world. For every family they tore apart, we erased a bloodline. They thought they had seen the worst of us. They were wrong, because humanity had long since abandoned the idea of simple survival. Now we wanted something else. We wanted revenge. The final battle came, not on some distant alien world, but in their home system. A place they had once considered untouchable. The beating heart of their empire, their last stronghold. They had fortified it, filled it with every remaining ship, every last soldier they could muster. It was a wall of steel, a final stand, an act of desperation. We didn't hesitate. We broke through their defenses in hours. We tore their fleets from the sky, ripped apart their stations, erased every last trace of their power. And when we reached the surface, it was not a battle, it was an execution. They fell before us, their weapons cast aside, their voices trembling. Some tried to fight, some tried to beg. It didn't matter. Because in that moment, as we stood victorious, as their empire crumbled into dust beneath our boots, there was only one thing left to say. The final words of humanity. Words that echoed across the ruined stars, across the silent remains of an empire that had once dared to challenge us. Words that would be remembered for generations, etched into history in fire and blood. War has a price, and we have made you pay. The silence was the strangest part. For years, the galaxy had been filled with the sounds of war, explosions ripping through the void, the screams of the dying echoing across comm channels, the relentless drumbeat of destruction. And now? Now there was nothing. Their empire, once a force that had ruled the stars for centuries, was gone. Their fleets were shattered, their worlds burned, their leaders dead. Humanity stood alone among the ruins. We had won. But victory didn't feel like we thought it would. The soldiers who had fought the hardest, who had burned the brightest with vengeance, now stood in the wreckage of a world that was no longer theirs to destroy. Some wept, some laughed, hollow and broken, and some just stared at the emptiness. For so long we had fought for survival. Then we had fought for revenge. But now? Now we had to decide what came next, and that was the most terrifying thing of all. We could have left, taken what we needed, resources, technology, knowledge, and disappeared into the black. Returned to Earth, to whatever was left of it, and tried to rebuild. But that wasn't who we were anymore, because Earth was gone. Not just physically, though its scars would never heal, but in spirit. The world we had been fighting for no longer existed. We had become something new, something more. And so, instead of leaving, we stayed. We looked at the shattered remains of their empire, the empty cities, the abandoned worlds, the broken remnants of a species that had once tried to exterminate us. And we made a decision. We took it, every planet, every station, every piece of infrastructure they had built over centuries. It was ours now, not out of mercy, not out of pity, but because that was the price of war. And we had every intention of making sure the galaxy never forgot. We did not rebuild their empire. We replaced it. Where their banners once hung, we raised our own. Where their laws had governed, we rewrote the rules in our image. Their cities, once filled with towering monuments to their own glory, were stripped down and remade to suit us. We did not ask for subjects. We did not offer peace. We made it clear, humanity ruled now, and if they wanted to survive, they would obey. The remnants of their species, those who had fled, those who had surrendered, those who had watched their civilization fall, had a choice: serve or vanish. Some tried to fight, clinging to the last shreds of their pride. Insurgents, rebels, dreamers who still believed they could undo what had been done. We put them down like dogs. We did not repeat their mistakes. When we wiped out their leadership, we didn't leave any seeds for resistance. We didn't allow figureheads to rise. We erased every trace of their old ways, their culture, their history, their symbols of power. Gone. They had tried to wipe us from existence. We simply finished the job. In reverse. The galaxy learned quickly. Other species had watched from the shadows as the war raged. Some had whispered of alliances, of helping us when the tide had been against us. But none had acted. None had risked themselves. And when we emerged victorious, when we took what we wanted, they crawled out of hiding like scavengers, hoping to negotiate. We did not negotiate. We made it clear. Humanity was no longer just another race among the stars. We were the rulers now. And there was no democracy, no councils, no debate. There was only us. 1,000 years from now, they will tell stories of how we rose. They will whisper our name with reverence and fear. Because war has a price, and we made everyone pay.